Everyone. This meeting of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission is being held on Wednesday, June 24th, 2020 at 9 a.m. as an electronic meeting pursuant to TCA 844-108. Given the ongoing concerns regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions against large public gatherings, the Commission has determined that it is necessary to conduct business today via teleconference. This meeting was noticed on the Commission's website and a public call-in number was provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. Judy, welcome. We'll talk in a few minutes more about Judy Spencer, who has joined us. But Judy, may I ask you to take a roll call of the commissioners?
Commissioner Griscom?
Present.
Commissioner Hanson? Commissioner Hanson? I think that was a...
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay, thank you. Commissioner Levine? Commissioner Levine? Okay, Commissioner Patterson? Was that Commissioner Patterson present? Okay. Commissioner Richards? Present. Thank you. Commissioner Sisnett?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith? Is that a present?
Yeah, can y'all not hear me?
There we go. Thank you. Commissioner Tucker? Present. Thank you. We have 6 of our 8 commissioners, and that is a quorum.
Thank you. So all of you all have access to today's agenda. Does anyone have any comments to make regarding the agenda before we proceed?
Mr. Commissioner, this is Wendy Tucker. I will have a comment when we get to the executive director piece, but I don't know that I need to do that now. Or I'll just have some questions.
Okay, no, we'll have a very thorough discussion, if you saw in the action items about the executive director. Thank you, Wendy. So with that, let me entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
This is Derwin, so moved.
Do I have a second?
This is Wendy, a second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Judy, may I ask you to call the roll, please?
Yes, and please respond aye, nay, or abstain when I call your name. Commissioner Griscom?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine? Commissioner Patterson? Commissioner Richards? Aye. Commissioner Sisnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
We have 6 of the 8 commissioners, and it passes.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes from the April 22, 2020 meeting. Anyone have any edits to make to these minutes? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
This is Eddie Smith. I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Chris
This is
Richards.
Wendy, I'll second.
Thank you. Judy, may I ask you to take the roll? And I do think we've had another commissioner who has joined the meeting.
Wonderful, yes. Commissioner Griscom?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Levine? Commissioner Patterson? Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
I have counted 6 of the 8 commissioners, and so the minutes are adopted.
Thank you. So let's move to item number 2, which are report items.
Tom, this is Chris Reynolds.
Yes.
I just got notified that Commissioner Patterson and Commissioner Levine are having technical difficulties. Wanted to notify you that we will continue to assist them in connecting, but they are following along on the public line.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for that update. Appreciate it. So now, Judy, thank you for getting us started. I'd like to introduce Judy Spencer, who is the Department of Education Director of Charter Schools, who would be supporting the commission while we ramp up our operations. I want to thank the Department of Education and the commissioner for providing this additional support at this time. As you know, we have 2 consultants, Steve Canavero and Chris Reynolds, who also are supporting the commission, as well as an interim general counsel, Chanel Tyler from the Attorney General's office. And now we have added Judy to this team. We look forward to continued support from all of these people as we do the setup and organization activities for the commission. Judy, let me just welcome you. Thank you. You've already been a very valuable asset. I'm glad to see you now in person. And is there anything you would like to share?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I am excited to be working with the Commission and helping it launch and start up, and I look forward to meeting each of you in person sometime, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Judy. With the recent action by the Tennessee General Assembly on Governor Lee's budget, most of you all know there was an across-the-board 12% reduction. The Charter Commission will be subject to this budget adjustment. In the material sent out to you in advance of the meeting was the impact on our budget, which is going to be around $90,000. I would like to ask Eve to share additional information that she has, and also while she is speaking to us, give us an update on office space as well. Eve?
Thank you, Chairman Grissom. My name is Eve Carney. I'm the Chief of Districts and Schools at the Tennessee Department of Education. As Chairman Grissom just mentioned, it's pretty public notice around the budget reductions that the state is being asked. More specifically, on May the 26th, Finance and Administration Commissioner Butch Ely released an agency-wide memo addressing the budget concerns resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. In this memo, each agency was asked to plan and implement reductions totaling 12% for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020, and this would include the Charter Commission. The budget cuts will be based on the base level budgets in finance and administration. For the commission, as illustrated in the chart that's in your document, that base amount is $701,600 that would be subject to that 12% reduction. That totals $84,192. The Business and Ops Committee meeting is July the 8th, and I know Chris Reynolds and others and Judy will be supporting that committee to identify potential cuts for the full commission's consideration at the July 22nd meeting. So again, the chart that you have in your materials lists that base budget amount, and I will talk briefly about the difference between that and the additional $250,000 that's additional state dollars that was not subject to the reduction. That is based on it that component is non-recurring to be replaced with authorizer fee once the commission assumes those responsibilities. And so that is the rationale for that $250 not being part of that 12% reduction. So in essence, the total Charter Commission budget prior to the reduction is $951,600. less the $84,192 requested reduction for an updated budget of $867,408. That is the information that we have to date. We are in ongoing discussions with Finance and Administration on this. The expectation is that this would be for the upcoming fiscal year, and so it's important that the Commission move forward now with identifying those reductions. For an update on the office space, on May the 14th, Commissioner Smith and I met with the facilities manager at Davy Crockett Tower to tour the proposed office space on the 5th floor in the Davy Crockett Tower. For reference, this is where the State Board of Education currently resides, and finding space in close proximity to the State Board would be beneficial in the transition and beyond. After we walked the floor, Commissioner Smith and I identified a space on the opposite side of the 5th floor from the State Board of Education and began to identify specifically what spaces would be needed to meet the needs of the Commission staff. My office then updated and resubmitted the required space allocation plan to the State of Tennessee Real Estate Asset Management, or STREAM, division for review. We had a follow-up conversation with STREAM on June 12th to answer their clarifying questions on the request and are awaiting next steps. I reached out to STREAM earlier this week to request additional information on timeline, et cetera, lease agreements. I am awaiting their response. My expectation is that by the July 22nd meeting, we will have that more specific information on lease, timeline, occupancy, and other information for the committee to report out to the full Commission. That is my update for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. One question, if I may. We're looking into the new state budget year. Do you have a date when it needs to be reported back to F&A or to the department, wherever it goes, on where, that we have made these reductions? I mean, is there a time frame? I know it's pretty urgent, but is there something that's driving to make sure there's a report back for what the changes are that we're making?
Our Deputy Commissioner is meeting regularly with Finance and Administration to ascertain that exact date. They have not given that. What they're trying to do is work with each agency to review those proposed reductions. And so I don't have an exact date. However, with this commission being new and building the budget for the first time, the expectation, I think, both for the commission and the agencies across all the agencies across the state government would be that during the month of July, those would be the topic of those discussions and conversations with Finance and Administration. I will push for an exact date, and if I receive one, I will share that out with the commissioners.
Thank you. And as you said, this will be on the agenda for the Operations and Budget Committee, and that you all will share with us your suggestions for where we may look for reductions. But knowing that a lot of what I'll call the backroom functions are already provided to us through the Department of Education, we're probably looking more at personnel, I would think, to get to this point. Is that a fair assumption?
I believe you are correct in those are the types of items that we would look to identify. I would say as we move into discussions about future meetings, there could be some savings there on travel, et cetera. One of the things that we did in looking at the office space, we tried to ensure that we were, while identifying appropriate office space, also being thoughtful about the budget and the use of the state dollars for this office space. And so I feel like once we get that lease from STREAM, we'll have a little more information about that, because I do feel like we have identified some cost savings there that would hopefully be helpful in these budget reduction conversations.
Thank you. Eddie, are you looking to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of echo when Eve and I met to look at the space. In the original proposal, it had what I'm just going to call an exorbitant amount of lobby space in the request for the space. Once we kind of got some of that back, there does appear to be, and we're waiting that final contract, some pretty significant cost savings in what the budget called for versus what we actually need. So that's probably going to be a very significant amount of cost savings that we can start with as we look at these budget reductions. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. As we were looking at that space, we just realized there was probably a little bit of overkill in the initial request for space.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Let me move to another piece in the update. And we will, as Commissioner Tucker mentioned earlier, in the action item, there will be a lot more conversation about the search for an executive director. It is underway. It continues, and we will, like I said, we will have a much more thorough conversation at that time.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment on the budget piece? I think
Okay.
you asked.
Sorry, yeah.
Did you ask for comments? Okay.
Yes.
I don't know how to respond. I don't know how to raise my hand here.
I figured that out too. So, but yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to point out, I think two things. One is the meetings can save a lot of costs depending on if we do other virtual meetings, you'll save all the hotel and transportation costs. If we do live meetings, we'll save hotel costs for everyone. So as we look at that, I guess we should think about it. And I would also say, and we could talk more about this in the executive director hiring process, but the timing of when we hire someone and if we do determine we need an interim versus bumping the hire date for an actual executive director and focusing on that could have a pretty big impact on that budget. So I do think we need to think of all those things together.
Thank you. And we thank for the setup, because if we go to number 4 from the Business Operations Committee, Chris and I had a conversation, I guess late last week. You all will recall that to set the meeting dates for the next calendar year, the deadline is October 15th. So we've got some time to work with. But to piggyback on your comment, Commissioner Tucker, is I asked Chris to put together for the Business and Operations Committee at our next meeting a number of options, meaning let's look at what the state board does. Let's look at what, for example, I know what TBR does, having served on that board, but let's look at other commissions and agencies in the state and just get a pretty good overview for us as a committee to look at in terms of how we might want to set up our meetings, going forward. And to your point, let's look at it too with a cost perspective, because if for example we did a 2-day type meeting, then we know there's added expense for some of us who do not live, say, in Nashville, who probably have to come there. So I'm right with you in thinking about that. So what would come forward to the committee is, here's some models of what we might look at. Here's a cost associated with them. And then out of there, try to put together a recommendation that comes back to full commission that hopefully is cost conscious, but also allows us, to do the business we need to do. So with that, Chris, let me call on you to provide additional information on this topic, please.
Thank you, Tom. This is Chris Reynolds, consultant to the Commission. As Tom mentioned, we are evaluating, multiple inputs into how we schedule things, not only for the remainder of the year, which I'll address in a moment, and in the upcoming calendar year. Those things are primarily budget, logistics to support the commissioner's service on the commission and on the committees, and then obviously the extended COVID-19 situation. Relatedly, we want to make sure the commission does not meet all the time in Nashville. So we are anticipating, once we reach a quarterly cadence in 2021, that we will have 2 meetings in Nashville and 1 meeting in West Tennessee and 1 meeting in East Tennessee. That is the tentative plan once we reach the quarterly cadence. Wanted to share that as our kind of guiding objective. We will also review best practices and related examples like Tom mentioned. You will notice in the meeting schedule that exists through December of this year that the commission meetings beginning in August are scheduled for 2 days. We may use 1 or 2 days in the upcoming months, but we had scheduled those. I believe it was Amity that helped with that a few months ago. So I wanted to notify everyone with a heads up that there may be a 2-day session. Now, to Commissioner Tucker's comments, at the current time, we're under the COVID situation, and so it's unlikely we'll be traveling. I'll update the entire commission in the next week or so with more information on that, but wanted to share directionally where we are heading. For the current year, for the remaining months in the current calendar year, we are anticipating a specially called meeting on July 22nd. We are anticipating a regular meeting in August, October, and December. And on the alternating months, when the commission does not meet, we will have a committee meeting. Those committee meetings are tentatively planned for Wednesdays on alternating weeks. So we wouldn't have a committee, we would not have 2 committee meetings on the same Wednesday. Again, I'm in contact directly with the committee chairs. We'll be working to confirm those meetings shortly, but you can anticipate them being held from 1 to 3 p.m. on Wednesdays in the upcoming months. Thank you, Tom. I'm happy to take questions if necessary.
Hey, the meetings ends at the end of this month, and so one of the things that I asked Eve to monitor and then share back with us is whatever extension that the governor puts out on those type of meetings. So that is another piece of information we don't have yet, but we're getting close to the end of the month. So as soon as we know, we will share that. So I just want to, are there questions for Chris on this topic?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Hey, this is Alan. It's good to see you.
See you.
Good to see Terrence also. I see he made his way in as well. Mine is not a question. It's more a comment. I just wanted to thank Chris. The phone call that he made to help come up with an organized cadence for the committee meetings, I thought was really helpful and well done. I just wanted to let you know, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the process you're using to try to get everybody's input. I thought that was very helpful. Just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that comment. Any other commissioner have a question or comment for Chris before we move on?
Mr. Chair, just wanted to confirm that for the foreseeable future, at least the aim is to ensure that these are virtual for this calendar year. And is that correct?
Yeah, and Derwin, may I ask you to start over and identify yourself for the record, please?
My apologies. This is Commissioner Cisnet. Just wanted to confirm that the meeting that we're referencing for this calendar year, the aim is for those to be virtual, and just wanted to get clarification on that.
That is my expectation. This is Chairman Griscom. This is my expectation, Commissioner. But Chris, let me turn to you. I mean, one thing that might change is if the governor decides to modify, his executive order that's out there right now. I personally do not expect that will happen just based on what we're seeing. But that would be one exception, Commissioner, that I think that might change some of that. Chris, do you have anything else you would add to that answer?
I have one thing to add, and that is we're in consultation with the Attorney General Office around compliance with the Open Meetings Act and the implications that both the governor's budget reduction may have on the cost structure of those in-person meetings versus virtual, as well as the department itself. We'll have more to update in the coming weeks. We're consulting with the attorneys, but the intention, as Chairman Griscom mentioned, is to conduct the meetings for the remainder of the calendar year virtually. But again, we will heed the advice of the Attorney General's office.
Mr. Chair, this is Alan. Do we have anything yet from the Attorney General's office in terms of an opinion? I mean, in terms of the meetings we're having now, are they compliant with the state's open meeting requirements?
Yeah, this is Chairman Griscom. Yeah, I mean, we have had a conversation with Chanel. I will ask Chanel to follow up what I'm going to say. And Janet Kleinfelter, also the Attorney General's office, who is on this call, has looked at it too. And that's part of the reason when we started the meeting that we have Chanel state what she does. So it's in our minutes and on the record of why we're conducting the meeting the way we are. But let me, Alan, let me turn to Chanel and ask her to come. And by the way, let me just remind everybody, please state your name so that we've got it on the record. Chanel?
Thank you, Tom. So yes, this is Chanel Tyler, and I just want to piggyback off of what Tom has just stated. That's correct. So we, as you've seen at the beginning of this meeting, we read into the record our statement regarding why we're having an electronic meeting. And so one thing that I would say to the commission is that's a determination that we would kind of make, based on the necessity of an electronic meeting. I know that Janet might have some additional thoughts on that, but it's really so that the public can still hear the meetings. So yes, we're compliant with that. That's why we provided the call-in number. So it's still an open meeting. But yes, that's exactly what Tom said. We really make a determination on a meeting-by-meeting basis as to whether or not there's a need. And as Chris has identified, budget and COVID concerns have come in there as well.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure we covered those traps. I presumed we would have, but I just wanted to make sure that the record reflected that.
Thank you.
Chairman Griscom, this is Janet Kleinfelter.
Yes.
And my division in the Attorney General's office is the division that advises everyone in state government on the Open Meetings Act. And so we have been involved in the meeting that is taking place today is fully compliant with all the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. And we have been in discussions and we'll work with the commission with respect to their meetings for the end of this year and the next fiscal year, making sure that your meetings are compliant with the Open Meetings Act while at the same time addressing the budget concerns that have resulted as a result of COVID-19.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, let me now move to the report from Terrence Patterson, the chair of the Rules and Policy Committee. Terrence, welcome. Glad you were able to to make the connection and get in. So would you please provide us with your committee update?
Great. Thank you, Tom. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Everybody okay? Looks like we're good, Terrence.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Chairman, it's my pleasure to provide the update to the Commission for the work that the Rules and Policy Committee has done. At our last meeting on April 22nd, the Commission provided feedback on the current draft of the rules and policies for charter applications, renewals, and appeals. And these were based on the existing rules and policies that were currently in use or that are currently in use by the State Board of Education. So using the feedback that we received from the April 22nd meeting, the documents have been edited and revised by Chanel Tyler, the counsel, as you mentioned, to the Commission. And I do want to make a brief note to say that Chanel has been amazing in helping our committee get through this process. So hats off and thank you, Chanel. So the next step toward formalizing the rules and policies is a public hearing to be held on July 10th, 2020. So this hearing has been publicly noticed and is posted on the Commission's website. After the hearing, any required edits will be made by Chanel Tyler, and updated versions will come to the Commission for formal approval on July 22nd of 2020. So this is a specially called Commission meeting that will be necessary to provide the required lead time for the Commission's rules and policies to be reviewed and then formally approved. So we expect these to be approved in time for the Commission's formal use beginning in January 2021. So we are driving hard essentially so we can be up and running by the beginning of 2021. And I'll also just remind the Commission and Mr. Chair that as we took a look at these rules and policies, we weren't seeking to make incremental changes per se, but we did want to have a focus on being best in class as we thought about the type of authorizer we wanted to be going forward. There will be opportunities down the road for us to make further revisions and edits, but we're balancing being best in class with being operational by January 2021. Oh, Mr. Chair, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, I think I've turned on, but let me. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Terry. The July 10 meeting is, my understanding, is going to be an electronic meeting, not one where commissioners will be coming to Nashville. But I think that's my understanding, wanted to ask Terrence and Chanel's here if that is correct.
Yes, Chanel, can you confirm that?
Yes, that's the intention at this time, that it would be an electronic meeting. I can't imagine that the COVID situation would change between now and then, so we can expect an electronic meeting.
No, thank you. I just wanted Terrence for other commissioners to know. We hope everybody will be on the call or on the Zoom, but it is not expected to be driving to Nashville to do this. So. Are there other questions for Terrence on his report? Terrence, thank you very much. You're right. Your committee has been really working hard, and appreciate all the work that you all have done.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So now let me move to the Governance Committee. Alan, would you please share an update from the Governance Committee? And again, welcome. We're glad both you and Terrence were able to get in here.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for the staff for helping us navigate getting in. I don't know what was going on with my iPad, but it finally worked. And first of all, thanks to staff at the department as well as to the Attorney General and our legal counsel for the work they did to help us get started at our first meeting with the rules, the bylaws, the things that we had to get up and running just to have a meeting and get started. The Governance Committee, right now, we've got 8 commissioners installed and confirmed. We have 1 open seat. Obviously, that seat would be filled at the pleasure of the governor. Once we've gotten word from the governor on his timeline and what appointments he's going to make, then we can decide how to help with the confirmation process if our help is needed. The coming months, I think we're going to establish a set of priorities for the committee. Number one, we passed those bylaws to get started. We obviously want to do a more thorough review of the bylaws and make sure that they properly reflect what the board wants going forward. Clearly establishing an onboarding process for the executive director in terms of the interface that the executive director will have with the board. and doing some proper onboarding and training. And then, of course, a self-evaluation for the commission so we can identify what our priorities are and what our colleagues on the commission want to make priorities for governance. So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the confidence you certainly placed in me to serve as chair. And of course, whatever priorities you have, we'll certainly make those a priority of the committee as well. And that's all I have for now.
Yeah. Any questions for Alan on his report? If not, we'll move into the third area on our agenda today, and it's an update on school turnaround. And so Eve is going to share the presentation and walk us through some of the thinking that's going on right now in the Department of Education. So Eve, thank you, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Griscom. Good morning. My name is Eve Carney. I am the Chief of Districts and Schools at the Tennessee Department of Education. This morning, I will provide a brief update on school turnaround as a follow-up to the update I provided at the February Commission meeting. Clearly, things have changed significantly since that time, and what we planned in most instances had to be revisited and adjusted. These adjustments will continue in the coming months as we shift our attention to reopening schools in this current environment. That being said, this will be the first of several updates I would propose to provide the Commission over the coming months on school turnaround, understanding that there is much we do not know at this time. And as we continue the important work of supporting the state's most vulnerable schools, I will keep the Commission informed. And with that, I will walk through this morning's agenda. I will first flag the high-level impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and its effect on the broad categorical work of the department. I will then provide a brief update on the current state of school improvement, specifically how it has been impacted from an accountability perspective. Then I will shift some information to the ASD, reviewing some key policy and legislative updates, and then finally walk through our next steps as we currently see them right now. So with that, as I noted earlier, much has changed since the February meeting. Next slide, thanks. Especially in a few critical areas. First, funds that were originally proposed in Governor Lee's budget to support charter schools and school turnaround, specifically the ASD or Achievement School District, were part of the necessary budget reductions resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Second, this pandemic surfaced new needs from districts and schools, and the department rightfully shifted its focus to support meal distribution, distance learning, technology, sanitation, things that were not part of the vernacular and discussions as much prior to March the 13th. Third, the pandemic resulted in unprecedented waivers and actions from the U.S. Department of Education for a host of assessment and accountability requirements, and we will walk through some of the implications of those now. So broadly, states are required to annually, meaningfully differentiate schools, including schools in need of improvement. In Tennessee, as a refresher, these are priority schools, or schools performing in the bottom 5% academically in absolute achievement, and focus schools, and those would be schools that have underperforming student groups rather than overall school achievement. Earlier, I mentioned the issuance of waivers by the U.S. Department of Education. Tennessee applied for and received the general or blanket waiver, essentially waiving all assessment and school designation requirements for the 1920 school year. As you might imagine, there are impacts and implications from this unprecedented action by the U.S. Department of Education, and that continues to unfold even now. What that means for current and priority schools is that the current designations that these schools hold will be held constant. So designations from the 18-19 school year will continue. Those designations will be held the same, no adjustments there. This also means no TVOS scores for districts, for schools, or for teachers. The longer term implications are, one, there will not be sufficient data to identify new priority schools as scheduled for the fall of 2021. 2, there really is no sense of when data will be available for the exit of current priority schools or for the identification of new schools, something that may not be known until we move through the next several months and receive additional guidance from the U.S. Department of Education. These are high-level distinctions and designations, and we have to be sure that we have sufficient data available to make those determinations. What we're hopeful, though, is that this accountability pause will allow another year of intensive support for our current priority and focus schools. We know that these schools need lots of support to be able to sustain gains that may be made in this time. It will also allow for us to plan for what school support may look like post-pandemic. Their needs are changing, and the department is committed to adjusting to meet those needs and meet schools and districts where they are. Again, that just continues to unfold. Next slide is a slide that I shared back in February, and I included it here because that feels like a long time ago that we had this first update. So I included it here to reframe the turnaround landscape and which school designations are included when we talk about turnaround. Across the bottom of the slide, you will see focus schools. The Every Student Succeeds Act enacted more aggressive action for schools with underperforming student groups. And what that means is that in an instance where a school continues to underperform with the same student group for 3 consecutive years, that school becomes a school with a priority designation. And so it's important and critical as part of our intervention and our strategy to intervene in focus schools to hopefully prevent and support schools in correction before they earn that priority designation, not waiting until that happens. The top 3 tiers of the pyramid represent the state's priority schools, and the supports for these schools will be tiered as the new turnaround structure is implemented with the reset of the ASD as part of that structure. That's a key component for when we talk about turnaround. That is also inclusive of the Achievement School District. As I noted earlier, we're continuing in the development of this new framework, making sure that we are deploying the state's resources as appropriately as possible across the 90 priority schools that we currently have, and we have over 200 focus schools. So clearly it's a big landscape, but as that work continues to evolve, I will keep you informed. Clearly, lots of the accountability implications impact the timelines of these things. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Generally speaking, this structure has not changed to what was presented to you earlier. What has changed, however, is the environment, what schools may need, the method in which we offer those supports, knowing that that could result in more virtual options, more technology, other supports that will be needed to ensure that students in our state's priority schools and focus schools are getting the supports they need for all students to be successful. The role of the state in this model becomes more prescriptive and intensive as a school moves up the tiers, with the ASD remaining the state's most intensive intervention. I will say that we continue to seek feedback. We continue to think through what this looks like, but understanding that a key part of this is that this is not done in a vacuum, but is done in partnership with the commission, with districts, with families and communities. And so I look forward to continuing that work. The next slide is specific to the Achievement School District. As we reset our school turnaround framework and the ASD, I think it's always important to clarify a key point. When the ASD was brought into existence, it was designed to focus intently on select schools, build that capacity in key areas in a sustainable way. So in other words, build them up and return them to their home districts so that they can be successful. It was never intended to be a forever home for any school. It was intended to provide that more direct support and focus to a certain subset of schools in that model. We are fast approaching the 10-year mark for the ASD legislation. That's a critical benchmark. We have to take action and build on what we've learned on the past eight and a half years to build a model where, again, in partnership with districts that have clear entry and exit points defined. And that's the work we are focusing on now at the department as we think about hiring a state turnaround superintendent who will oversee the full continuum, not just the ASD, but really the whole landscape, so that that engagement with districts begins long before a school ever gets to an ASD selection process. The next slide, I just wanted to highlight a couple of key Tennessee Code annotated policies that are specific to the Achievement School District. The first one really identifies means of transition out of the Achievement School District. One would be on performance. A school that is no longer on 2 consecutive priority lists would be one way means of transition. 2, reaching the 10-year expiration of a charter ASD charter school agreement. And 3, the authority in TCA that the commissioner has to remove a school from the Achievement School District as she, in this instance, seems appropriate. Those are the 3 mechanisms that are currently in statute. The next slide highlights more recent legislation that passed, really requiring the department and the commissioner to fully develop that transition plan to return ASD schools to their districts. The legislation requires that transition plan to be completed by January the 1st, 2021, and states return no earlier than the 24-25 school year. Over the past several months, long before this legislation passed, we had begun to really work on that transition legislation for the next legislative session, working specifically to specify those certain conditions that schools need during that transition to be successful. So this is very much a work in process at the department, and more to come in subsequent updates on this transition plan. We also look forward to engaging with you in the feedback space as well there. Next steps on the last slide. Clearly, as I mentioned, the work has begun on this transition plan. This fall, we will be soliciting feedback from stakeholders in a number of ways, hopefully some in person, some online, some with some key stakeholder groups across the state as we develop that transition plan to submit prior to the January 1, 2021 date. We are also in the process of revising the Achievement School District's school performance framework, knowing that as this work moved into my office, that it had not been updated in a number of years, nor had it been applied as intended. And so that is a component that I'm working on currently. We're working solidly on a draft, and I would request to come back to the commission to share that with you later this fall. For now, these are the updates I have. The work clearly continues. I hope that this can become more of kind of a regular update that we provide, knowing that the Charter Commission will have some implications to some of the work and decisions, and look forward to the partnership and appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Chairman.
Eve, thank you for the update. Let me now open it up for commissioners who have questions or looking for more information from Eve on this report. Thank you for doing this, Eve. I mean, you and I had talked about this, for a couple of weeks. I appreciate this overview for us, so we've got a feel for where the department is and some of the impacts that have come from COVID-19. So I really appreciate it. Commissioners, questions for Eve on this report?
Hi, this is Wendy. I have a question. Hi, Eve. Good morning. Good morning still, right?
Good morning.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation. And I'd wondered how COVID was going to engage with this plan, so I appreciate it. My question really is, when you presented to us in February, I thought it was clear from that presentation that there were conversations, and the reason that you were presenting to us on it, about the commission potentially overseeing some of these schools. These schools would, I guess, go apply to their district. If their district denied them, they would appeal to us, or that the commissioner would. So I'm trying to figure out if I didn't hear any interaction between these schools and the commission in your presentation. And so I'm assuming you wouldn't be presenting to us if that wasn't a possibility. And I know in February, several of us expressed concern about the fact that these schools would they be applying as new starts to us? Would they be applying as renewals? And in that case, if they're still in the bottom 5% and they're a renewal, the commission would have to use different standards to accept them. And so I'm wondering if we're still in that same place, or if we don't know because of COVID.
I appreciate the question, and looking back, I could have included a little bit of that in my framing at the beginning, but you're correct. That's where we are in terms of, certainly we recognize that the Charter Commission would have the appellate role as we think about transition of schools out of the Achievement School District. And so part of that is, to the comments that were provided in February, we have also begun, because I do think it was a great flag to say that while these schools aren't new, nor are they renewal, we are also in the process of developing an ASE transition application that would be used specifically for ASE exit. And that is another piece. So my plan in trying to layer and share this information with the commission as it gets to a space is to begin by providing foundational information as I come back in subsequent meetings, would be to share those pieces that are under development, which would be, 1, this transition application. 2 would be what we are using for ASD, School Performance Framework, just so that you all have a clear sense of the way in which we will hold schools accountable in the ASD. There was a great need for a new framework for our purposes, specific to our ASD schools. And so knowing that this COVID pandemic paused a number of conversations that were scheduled for the week after Easter that did not happen. On June the 2nd, Interim Superintendent Lisa Settle and I communicated with operators around that much of our anticipated plans were paused. And so as a result of that, and I'm looking at the letter we sent, that the original expectation is that these schools would make application with their home districts by the December 2020 deadline. However, as a result of the pandemic, we're not pursuing that timeline at this time, knowing that we are at a space where there's a lot of uncertainty. Schools didn't have a chance to exit. We have other concerns. So we're trying to take this moment to get those critical pieces developed, and those will be the pieces that I will come back and share with you all at your, hopefully a little bit in July, August, et cetera.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Chairman, I think you may be on mute.
No. Let me see. Okay, is it back? All right.
Yes, sir.
Twice. Thank you. Again, thank you for this. You and I have had several conversations trying to figure out the impact on our, what we do. So I appreciate it. And any update, this probably ought to be something that we keep on our agenda, and just ask you to keep sharing with us as the State Department of Education looks at it, and then the impact on us. So thank you. Any other?
I would welcome that opportunity.
Thank you. Any other questions here? All right. We're going to move into the action items. There's 4 of them. I would like to share with Commissioner sort of an overview and how we got to the action items that you're seeing. This has been an interesting process. I'm not going to blame it on COVID-19, but it sort of turned some things a little upside down. You all will recall that the process got started when Amity was still very directly involved with us as a commission. Amity chose to leave. She's now working for the Memphis-Shelby County school system. And we had a transition period. Eve was selected, I think it's the right word, by Commissioner Swin to step in. I also quickly appreciate the fact that Eve's got like 7 other areas of responsibility within the State Department. And so while Amity really was very hands-on, Eve was, was here, but spread a little bit broader. And the process had been set up, was continuing. We had a couple conversations during this time about COVID-19 and how it might affect it. We wanted to continue on the path that we were on. I will share in this only for context. I hope that none of the rest of the commissioners have had to deal directly with COVID-19. I did. And I will share with you all that my attention probably got turned a little bit different because when it happens and you're trying to figure out some of the symptoms and impacts and things like this, that it does sort of take your time and attention in a different way. And I'm not saying this as any excuse. I'm just sharing with you all. Because I found out, later, as we worked through these issues and realized the sort of concern that comes with it, because it in my opinion, we saw within our family, well, I'm sorry, our extended were very things that we had read and seen. So we get back, and I asked to at least have an opportunity to review the candidates to date. After I reviewed that, then I reached out to Eve and to Chris and asked them to share this list with each commissioner individually, which they did. And I appreciate what you all shared back with Chris. It also became apparent to me that we needed somebody who was really full-time, working with Eve and with Chris. And this is where Judy came in to help us have somebody that really could stay on top of this process and some other things going forward, but really to help have a staff person dedicated to tracking where we were with the executive director search. I remember at the very beginning what was said to all of us that this is probably the most important decision we will make. And so having Judy already in place now, I share with you all as the chair, has been a real help as I've looked at this in trying to sort of think it through, but to know that there's somebody in place who is working with us and who is going to have more of a hands-on going forward. I also reached out to Chanel, and Chanel brought in several of her other attorneys at the Attorney General's office to walk through and talk through with me sort of where we were. And we are at a point right now where the permanent executive director search is still continuing. But we've taken some time to step back and look at, we've got a lot of needs with the commission that need to be fulfilled. We need somebody in this, in a role, potentially, and you've seen some of the materials sent out, they're here on an interim basis that can serve and help us continue as we're putting the commission together, getting staffed up, and all the other details that are there so we're ready to fully operate the first of the year. But also to allow time for a permanent executive director to identify other potential avenues to make it known that this search is going on, and to share information with commissioners on asking for your, if you've got people that we ought to consider they get put in. So I wanted to start this with, with that overview, and to, say this is why we've got the action items you see, and you will. What I want to talk as we go through them is creating a committee of the whole, so that every commissioner is involved from this point forward. A suggestion that to continue the work that we need to do of an interim, and we will look at a job description was put together for that. One of the things I would like to note before we get into it is in many cases, interims are just that. I think in this case, because of the period of time, the suggestion you're going to see is that the interim could be a candidate for the permanent executive director position. And then to go through just an approval of the process for the interim, and then some other just sort of housekeeping. So with that, let me stop, because I know that Commissioner Tucker, as we began, had a comment. And so before we get into the action items, let me open it up for commissioner conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Commissioner Tucker, Wendy. First, I want to say I'm really sorry about your experience with COVID, and I hope that you and your family are well. And I don't wish that on anyone. I'm sorry about that. And that I don't think you needed to make any excuses for anything. You did all the work you needed to do anyway. But I'm really sorry about that. My concern, and I've expressed this to Chris Reynolds, who probably passed it on to you, Mr. Chair, and so I just want to share it with the rest of the commissioners, is this issue of an interim. In my mind, an interim is someone who comes from an organization that already exists. They're on the bench. They step up for this period of time because they know the organization, they know the people, and they just kind of do the work until somebody's hired. And we don't have an organization, and we don't have people. And so I don't know that an interim, in my mind, an interim makes any sense in this structure. Other concerns I have are that they're hiring people that the final executive director or, permanent executive director is expected to adopt. And if it's me walking into a job and I'm told that I'm expected to take this team on and it's not my team, I would have a hard time with that. I think it'd be hard to get great people as an interim, knowing that somebody else is going to come in to be the boss and you don't know who that is. So I have those concerns. And I would also say that at the state board, I had the honor of being there when Sarah Morrison, then Sarah Hayburn, went through the hiring process and was hired. And it was a pretty quick process. I mean, it was a robust process. It was internal. We did not have an RFP. People put their feelers out. There was a list. There were interviews, and Sarah was hired, and she's amazing. And so I don't know that this timeline requires an interim. I think if we did that, we all have networks, and we have networks who have networks. And so I guess one question I have that I don't have the answer to, and I don't know if Sarah was able to get on or if anybody from the state board is on, what I would love to get a better understanding of is what the expectations are going to be for us as a commission as we get into December, January, and like how intensive that work is going to be so that we can kind of figure out when an ED really needs to be in place. That'd be my big question for them.
Thank you, Wendy. Other comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Alan Levine. I appreciate Wendy's comments. I have a little bit of a different perspective. I don't have a problem with an interim because I do think there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done. Where I would be concerned is if the interim may also be a candidate for the full-time role. You potentially, based on the candidates that I saw a very diverse and highly qualified slate of candidates so far. And I worry that some of those candidates that are strong may not want to enter a public process if the incumbent may potentially be a candidate themselves, because they might feel like it's already been sort of baked, even though no one's suggesting that that's happened. That could be a perception they might have, and I would want to defer to the search firm on that and how potential candidates would view an interim that may also be a candidate. But the idea of having an interim I'm not as concerned about that. That's where I probably would diverge a little bit from Wendy's perspective. But I do think that the search firm has assembled quite an impressive slate so far of candidates.
Thank you, Alan. Other commissioner comments?
Mr. Chair, sorry. Can we hear from somebody from the state board on that timeline? I think that would help us just trying to figure out what the expectations are going to be on us and when.
Yes, we can. Eve, do you have any, because we have talked about what these items and sort of trying to think it through. Do you have any thoughts that you could share with us today?
I think Sarah Morton is actually on as well, Mr. Chair. I mean, Sarah could actually speak to since we're adopting their schools, she would probably know.
So I did not see on my list. If you are here, Sarah, would you be willing to answer the question?
Dialing as well. I'm just on by audio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm happy to answer Commissioner Tucker's question. Tess is on vacation, or she would normally be joining your meeting, and I'm sure have a more thorough answer. But suffice to say, we are still in the process of reviewing appeals this cycle. So we will be working shoulder to shoulder with whoever is in either a permanent or an interim position with the commission through the fall and winter. The way the appeal cycle works, districts will get applications at the early part of next calendar year in January or February, and then be working through the initial review at the district level first. We don't get appeals at the state board until the summer. So you still do have a bit of time until the work gets real, if you will. I mean, I think the work that the policy committee is doing, a lot of the groundwork that needs to happen is really where I would imagine most of the focus for the executive director and team will be over the course of the next 6 months. And then starting in 2021, I would say about this time of year is when appeals start to heat up and the work, becomes a little bit more intensive. So the next 6 months really is sort of the preparation, and it's a little, I don't want to say a lighter lift, but essentially it is, because you won't be managing the schools that are under our district until you take that over next year under the appeals.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards, do you want to follow? Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I always like to see these meetings because it gives us a chance to discuss our various viewpoints. And I think the strength of this commission is that we have various viewpoints. I have to admit, having looked at the pool of candidates produced by the search firm, that I found a very minimal number even had the two basic requirements that were in the job description. Of the ones that had the basic requirements, they seem to also not have many of the additional nice-to-have things that we put in the job description. So I gave my feedback that I thought that we needed to get after the search firm because, quite frankly, I was very unimpressed with the pool. That being said, our original time frame to meet our required work was to have our executive director in place by July or August at the latest. And I don't see that as a realistic, achievable goal given what all has happened in the interim. None of us foresaw this pandemic, and we're all having to adjust to it. So I am strongly supportive of a interim executive director being retained, because I think we need to move on with this. I think the statute is clear on what our expectations and job duties will be the 1st of January of 2021. And until somebody tells us otherwise, I think we have to expect to be prepared to meet those obligations. I'm very concerned that we're not going to be ready if we don't continue to work on these things moving forward. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so let me, I want to share back with you all sort of the thinking of what's sitting here. And this was just so, as a commission, we could have the conversation we're having right now. Is you're right. The initial goal that was set up for us was to have somebody in place by July, August at the latest. And so when it became apparent to me that we probably were not going to get there and we needed to have a little broader look in selecting what I'm calling the permanent executive director, that did we need somebody at least in place, and let me just add, I can't thank again Eve reaching out to Judy and Judy coming in, because needing somebody like that to help move things along was very important. And so the interim was, did we need somebody who is in this role to at least continue moving these items for us as we go forward, knowing we've got this timeline for the first of the year, and then and typically, Alan, to your point, having done these in the past, I usually look at interims as just that. But my concern and reason I wanted to bring it up to talk about it is for somebody to come in for a period of maybe 3 to 4 months, probably is what it is. If they come in, I doubt if somebody, except to go to where Commissioner Tucker was, and that may not be bad. I'm not saying it is, but for somebody to step in and say, so you are asking me to step out of my career for a couple of months, make that call. Would I want to do this and make myself available, having the opportunity that I could decide whether to be a candidate myself? And Alan, you're right. The search I've been involved in, people look at it and try to figure out, is there an in-house candidate? And this person might be, I think it'd be fair to look that way. So is there already a sort of a signal of where the commission is going? And that is an issue, granted. But I thought to even have the conversation, we at least needed to say, if we went this way, this person probably needed to know, you can decide if you want to be a candidate for the permanent job. You may decide you don't want to be. But that's sort of part of the rationale and discussions that we're having to at least get this in front of the commission day for a conversation.
Mr. Chair, this is Wendy again. If I could just,
please.
First of all, Commissioner Richards, if I wasn't clear, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that list. That list was not what we're looking for when this is the most important job we're going to do as a commission, is to hire the best person possible. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that list is not where we should be. I guess where I'm having a fundamental problem here is it's going to be, you just sort of touched on this, Mr. Chair. It's going to be harder to find somebody who wants to walk away from their job for a couple months for an interim position. If we're gonna pick somebody that we think is good enough to lay the foundation for our organization, why isn't that just the ED? Why do we have to do some process where we say you're going to be an interim? Why can't we just do the same process for an ED? I don't understand. And then if we don't find one, we could hire somebody temporarily or do whatever we need to do. But I feel like asking a high quality candidate to come in for 4 months and lay a foundation and then walk away, it just doesn't make sense to me. I just don't think you're going to get the level of quality if you say interim that you'll get if you say executive director. So let's just try to hire an executive director. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Other commissioners want to discuss this part? Sure. We move. Yes.
Yeah, Terrence Patterson. I just have a clarifying question. Are we sticking with the existing search firm, or is there a possibility that we get a new search firm given the quality of the candidate pool that we've received thus far?
Terrence, let me, I had Chanel looked at the contractors in place, and the search firm is still under contract. Chris has been involved too. And so I think at this point, and the reason I gave you all the setup at the front end, I think the personnel change that happened had an impact on the direction for the search firm. And in my mind, I don't think that there was a clear direction laid out for the search firm to do the outreach to various groups. I mean, Judy and Chris and Eve and I have had that conversation of identifying groups that ought to be notified to know we're looking at it. I also think that commissioners, if you've got somebody you would like to put their name in, but I think it's important not for that person to think they've got an inside track because a commissioner may be, reaching out to them. And so my answer to you is that yes, I think we would stay with the firm, but I think we would have much more of a hands-on involvement. Again, I say this is why I really appreciate Judy coming on board to really provide that, almost day-to-day internal focus, working with the search firm to really line out what we're looking for, to expand the outreach of people that we want to make sure they know we're looking for this. And then, as I said, for commissioners, if you've got a thought, to do it appropriately, and we can talk about it. So yes, the contract is there. There's still room in this contract. My intention would be that yes, they would stay involved, but we would have Judy much more on a day-to-day basis, sort of helping manage this and direct what's going on. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Hi, it's Dave Hansen. So
yes.
Is there a reason that we couldn't potentially impose on wonderful Judy Spencer's time a little bit longer while we sort of reassess what our candidate pool looks like? I guess I wonder, I sort of straddle what Wendy, Commissioner Tucker, and Commissioner Richards are saying in terms of if we are struggling to find a great high-quality pool of talent and everyone, all of us personally, professionally, and the commission and potential executive directors are all struggling with COVID, I wonder, could Judy Spencer potentially help us kind of bridge the gap, and that would obviate the need to have an interim, kind of the start-stop of putting someone in the role and then potentially pulling them out of the role?
Possibly, Dave. So let me respond, then I'll ask Judy and Eve. I want Judy to be able to work with us as long as she can, so we move forward going through, to be ready to do the work. And so I'm looking for the fact that we have Judy available to us to hang on to Judy as long as we can. Because I'll just tell you, for her being in, for me personally, it's been very helpful for the past couple of weeks that she's been here. So I've spoken, Judy, for you and for Eve. Let me, and I think, Dave, it's not necessarily saying, I think for Judy to step in and become this executive, an executive director, interim or whatever, but to help us get to that process, because I wanted to get a sense that we're having right now. And it's been very useful because we could get the process moving again for a permanent, but I'm trying to get a sense from you all of how you felt, and this has been good to hear. So Judy, let me turn to you and Eve, because I just spoke with you, and let you yourself.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm happy to support the commission however I can, and I want you all to view me as a resource. I practiced law for 20 years prior to this, and so I really get into all the details and the rules and the policies, and I love reviewing that. And so I'm happy to devote as much time as you all need for me. And I'll let Eve speak to that capacity as well.
Thank you, Judy. And as I was listening to the various comments, my thinking is a little bit of a hybrid. To Commissioner Hansen's point about kind of Judy being that bridge, to me, I could see her role working very closely with the firm, because I think what was missing with when I inherited this work and the contract, the RFP for this work, I think it was very general, and I don't think that there were specific call-outs to scout talent, specific talent needed for this body of work. And I think Judy could be very skilled in helping identify those things and really kind of managing that search firm to do some of the lifting, to do some of the vetting, but also to ensure that what we bring back to this group is a robust panel or a selection of candidates for that process. My understanding from Amity and others is that this external party was due to a capacity issue, and so I don't want to exacerbate that by trying to now absorb all of that versus taking kind of the networks that they may have and inserting other networks and other recommendations for that search firm to use to yield a different slate of candidates.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
For the sake of time, first of all, I'm really interested. This is obviously not the time and place, but I want to learn more from my colleagues about what we all are hoping for from the candidate pool. I have tremendous respect for those who have spoken, who've articulated they're not happy with the pool. I actually thought the pool was pretty decent, not great, but decent. Certainly would want to get more candidates. This sort of goes to why I'm going to make this motion. I think, given where we're at, I think you've got to have flexibility as the chair to keep us on a path for the deliverables that the legislature expects from us. So I'm going to make a motion. I'm sure it'll draw some discussion. I'm going to go ahead for the sake of time and make a motion to authorize you to execute an agreement to establish an interim executive director at your discretion while we concurrently continue to move the search forward. I would make that as a motion.
Commissioner Levine has made a motion. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Richards. I second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Could we get some clarity on exactly what, I mean, is this just saying that you pick an interim, Mr. Chair? Is that the motion, or that you establish a process to pick an interim? I'm confused because it's not what the action items on the agenda are.
Well, so if you'd like for me to clarify, that's a good question, Commissioner. My intent was for the chair to be authorized to go and hire an interim. I think it might be a little bit too much flexibility. Perhaps he can choose an interim and bring that person back for approval by the commission, and I will amend my motion to reflect that. I do think the commission needs to sign off on whatever the selection might be.
And so, Commissioner Tucker, may I respond to your question and Alan's response? My thought is if we went down this path, was that there would be a very quick process that Judy would drive, that we would ask each of you, if you have a name of somebody that ought to be considered, to ask you to put in. I do think from earlier conversation, it's probably going to be somebody who is in this sphere right now, and it is not like somebody who is out of state wanting to come in, but that we would set up a very quick process, get these names. Judy would talk to the ones that came in. We would convene as a committee of the whole and decide then, do we have the person to do? And Alan, I appreciate your, I am not looking as the chair to make this pick. I will just share with you all the last several months being in this role have been interesting. And And so, Wendy, I hope that is helpful. But no, I appreciate what Alan said, but in my way of thinking about it, because one of the action items does talk about, if you all want to do an interim, how it would be done. And there would be a very quick process, but that is, I share that back with you all as to what my thinking was just to put this on here. So, Alan, I hope that is helpful, and Wendy, I hope it's responsive to you.
If I, I just want, can I ask another question? So, I mean, I will be opposed to this interim thing for all the reasons I've stated, but I just want to make sure, and I appreciate, Mr. Chair, you're amending that, but I want to make sure I want to make sure that our process, like the motion is clear and our vote is clear on exactly what it looks like. I think there are a lot of eyes on this commission, and it is important for transparency to be, and I know we all want this, but I just want to make sure while we're in the, in the thick of this, that we remember transparency is incredibly important. And I just think, again, this is the most important position that this commission will fill, and that person, whoever is there, I think initially is going to fill the other positions around them that are really important. And so I think transparency is going to be really important in this process. So I appreciate you, Mr. Chair, saying you don't want to be just going and picking somebody and bringing them to us. I don't think that would meet what the legislature intended for us to be. So I just want to make sure whatever the motion is, it's clear that there's a process and what that process is.
Thank you. Pardon me, Al. Part of this discussion today is this whole point about being very transparent. Thanks. Yes, sir. Yes, Alan.
Well, I think, to be clear, when you choose a CEO of any organization, by definition, you're delegating authority in that CEO. Right now, we don't have a CEO. And as evident, there's a lot of different opinions here on things that need to be done. 8 people can't act as a CEO. And we have to be able to delegate some authority to the person we chose to be our chair to keep this process moving. We can't sit without somebody in the role that's making day-to-day decisions and moving us forward, or it's not, or we're not properly organized. I mean, from a governance standpoint, somebody's got to be responsible for the day-to-day activities of what we're delegated by the legislature to implement. I worry about rushing into a search and rushing to get through a search because we're so concerned about not having somebody in that role. I'd rather take our time, get the search done properly, have a competent interim in place. I agree with the chair on that. What the process is, I'm less concerned about. I trust, because we selected him as our chair, that he knows, based on the job description we've selected, he knows the type of person we need to keep the engines moving while we do our search. I would trust, Mr. Chair, I would trust you to identify someone and bring somebody back to us that we can agree on to move us forward in the interim while we continue the search process. I mean, the boards function all the time by delegating authority. That's not a new concept. And I don't think it lacks transparency because everything you're doing is subject to the sunshine, subject to government in the sunshine. So that's all. Look, I'm trying. We have 30 minutes more in the meeting, and we haven't made a decision about this. And I think we've got to give the chair some direction on this.
Thank you, Alan. Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? If not, I would.
This is Commissioner Cisnet. I just wanted to add to the discussion. I do also have concerns about bringing on an interim while we're also searching for an executive director. I think especially given the timing of all this, I think there's some inherent conflicts in who we might bring on as interim that might potentially be vying for the ED role. Whoever comes into that position, really, having just, I think it creates some negativity around the process. I think we've spent some time with the current organization that's been doing the vetting and searching for us. I, like some of the other commissioners, have expressed I was not satisfied with the complete pool. That's not to say there wasn't an applicant here or there that could eventually or potentially emerge. I don't want to discredit any of the applicants, but as the pool, I was frankly disappointed and would like to continue the process. This is, as Commissioner Levine pointed out, this is an important process. This is an important hire, the most important hire we can make. So what I wouldn't want us to do is to rush that hire, or quite frankly, even an interim's hire, because that interim could potentially be the ED. I think we have, some consultants on board. We have some full-time folks on board who I think are, quite frankly, doing just yeoman's work, women's work. And I think if we continue down that path, I'm confident in that. And I also pledge to commit more time as a commissioner to the process, even being on the committee for this hiring. And so, that obviously comes for free. So I'm offering that up just to share that this is an important process. I will put more effort into it as a commissioner. But what I wouldn't want us to do is to go down the path of quickly hiring an interim, and then potentially that interim could be the ED, and it's creating some conflict where if just for the next 30 to 60 days, we could potentially solve for this. So I just wanted to state that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other comments? Can I call for a vote on Alan's motion? And are we ready to have a roll call on Alan's motion? Judy, did you write down? Can you restate the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the motion that is on the floor is that you as the chair would bring a candidate to the rest of the commission for approval as the interim executive director. As a point of clarification, we had set on the agenda action item 3, which set forth a process for approving an interim executive director. Commissioner Levine, are you proposing to amend the process proposed as action item 3 to the motion as you stated?
Let me just review. I'm just reviewing the bullets really quick. So the interim, the way I understood the bullet points in that proposed search process for an interim director was that there'd be nominations of candidates, evaluations by internal staff, and then we would review all of the candidates at the July 22nd meeting. Is that my understanding of the process that's been laid out?
That was, yes, that was going to be talked about to look at if we were to do an interim. Yes.
Mr. Chair, is it your preference that be the process, or would it be more expeditious for you to have the authority to bring back a candidate that you're comfortable with? What would be your preference?
Commissioner, I shared with all of you all my preference, and I think you see with the action item that's here, because I was involved in nothing to take that, just a conversation, and so I think that again shares my perspective.
Well, in that case, I don't want to do something. I don't want to delegate something to the chair that the chair doesn't want delegated. But I think the process that was laid out in there is fine. I think it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more timing. It'll take more time, I think, to get it done. But I would certainly amend once again my motion to reflect the process that was in the original proposal, and just leave it at the motion would be to move forward with an interim executive director pursuant to the process that was laid out in that original document.
Thank you. So let me, for all commissioners, this is based on what commissioners need to lay out. This is whether we want to do an interim or not. And that's, we were going to get there because there's other steps in here that we will talk about that do keep the process moving forward. So, Alan, is it fair for me to interpret what you have proposed and what Chris has seconded, that it really is a vote on whether we're going to do an interim or not?
That's what it boils down to. And I would just suggest, as I make it part of the motion, to move as quickly and expeditiously as possible to get someone in place.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So Judy, with that, will you call the roll and will you call me last, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Please respond with aye, nay, or abstain. Commissioner Hanson.
Nay.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
No.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Nay.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Smith? Okay. Commissioner Tucker?
No.
Commissioner Griscom, Mr. Chair?
No.
The motion is defeated.
Thank you. And Alan, thank everybody for the conversation. Now, we're going to move, and one of my goals is to keep us on track. But I appreciate all this discussion because I think we got a lot that was laid out that I think is helpful. So I would like now to go to action item A, which is to establish a committee of the whole. And what I would like to propose, and this goes back to where I shared my experience here, I would like for the whole commission to be the body that will make this decision. I'm going to lift it out of where we had ministry set it up, but would like, in terms of full transparency, for us to create a committee of the whole so that as we move forward with the process, which we will do, that every commissioner then is involved in, when Judy gets in, and we'll talk some more details, we've discussed some of getting all the candidates, getting them pulled together, sharing like what we did when Chris sent them out, and then setting up meetings where we would go work through and get down to where we will finally be to select a permanent director. But I would like to have all commissioners being involved in this process because, again, I went back and saw in our orientation this is the most important decision we'll make, and so therefore I'd like to lift it out and recommend that we create a committee of the whole for the selection of a permanent executive director and would entertain a motion to do so.
This is Wendy, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
I'll
Thank
second.
Terrence Patterson.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I don't see any, Judy, unless you do. May I ask you to call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, could I just ask that you state the motion one more time for us?
The motion is to create a committee of the whole. Now, Wendy, make sure I'm saying it right because you made it. Create a committee of the whole of the Charter Commission for the sole purpose of selecting the next executive director.
Thank
Wendy,
you.
Okay.
Is that what you were saying?
Do we have confirmation?
That's the motion I heard.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Judy, may I ask you to call the roll?
Yes, please respond aye, nay, or abstain. Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you all. Let me move to item B.
Sorry, Commissioner Griscom, I missed you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, ma'am, thank you. When we went back and looked at the job description that's out there for the executive director, and Chanel helped me go back and look at it, because one of the questions was, who makes this decision? And it is the commission that makes the decision. In the original job description, it is mentioned in there that the State Department of Education, has this role. So and Chris looked at it, and you will see we are making one change, so it's very clear that the selection process, and we've got this way, this is a process that is designated to the Public Charter Commission to do. And that's what the change is. Otherwise, it's the same as here, but I felt it was important for us to make sure there's no question. I said, I'm going to thank Chanel, because as part of her information back to me, to make sure we knew where this decision rests. And so that is, what is as action item B, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
This is Commissioner Tucker, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Alan, second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Judy, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Please respond with aye, nay, or abstain. Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Commissioner Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. And so based on our earlier action, then items C and D, we don't need to act on. Now, one of the things that, and thank you all, one of the things that we'll get back with you very quickly is I'll talk with Eve and Judy and Chris to lay out a process, what it will look like going forward. And in there is going to be, and Judy and I have had this conversation, some additional groups to reach out to. And also, again, I'm asking all commissioners, if you have a candidate you'd like to suggest, please submit it to Judy. Judy's going to be working with the search firm. I'm going to put that link in here so that we have that, back and forth going on. It is very important, though, I think. So what Judy would want is, here is a name, here is contact information, here is a bio, but I would ask you all to be very judicious so that if you have somebody that they don't interpret that because a commissioner's reaching out, that they may have an advantage, something like that. You all know this, you've been involved, but again, I'm going to say, having Judy here as that real go-between to make sure we're in coordination. Terrence, back to your earlier point, I think working with the search firm, that'll make it a little smoother, and then we will lay out an actual formal process to look at to get there so that you all know sort of where we're going. I think it's going to be important for the search firm to go back to the candidates who are in this pool right now, find out if they remain interested, and as the search is going to continue to be identifying other potential candidates. So don't hold me to this right now, but we probably, with where we are, and we get get a process set up, we might be in a position by sometime in early September to actually have made this recommendation and reached out to somebody. But we will put that together now, coming out of this meeting, and share it with you all to sort of look at, here's what we think is a reasonable process from this point forward.
Mr. Chair, can I ask two questions? This is Commissioner Tucker. One, if we may not know people specifically for the job, but have networks that would know people for the job, or is that, Judy, is that too much to send you, like, these are people we know who might have names? Is that too much?
I think that would be very helpful, Commissioner Tucker. I'm happy to contact networks as well.
Yeah,
okay, I mean, because
wait, let me add one. I think that is is a great suggestion, because then Judy can send them the information on the job. So yes.
Right. And then my second question is, once we have that process, can we make sure that it's posted on our website or on our webpage, I guess, just to make sure that candidates have a way of knowing it, but also that we're showing the transparency that I think is really important in this process?
Absolutely, yes.
Well,
I would, coming out of here, I want to, follow up with, with Judy and Chris and Eve. We have looked at a potential template. This helps sort of modify it a little bit, but yes. Somebody else was going to make.
Thank you.
Well, this is Alan. I was just going to make one.
Yes.
This may sound really trivial, but just remember, if we start sending things around with people's names on them, if those people don't know their names are being thrown around, these are public documents, of course. So we just have to be mindful that whatever we send to staff is a public record. And if we're nominating people, we might want to make sure that they're aware that their name might show up somewhere.
Good reminder. Thank you, Alan, because yes, as you all got the initial list, I made, in talking with the search firm, I want them to understand that these names are now out there if somebody found them, but that's, yes, so great. But thanks for bringing that up. If you've got somebody, and Wendy, to the point of here's a group to talk to, but if you've got a name you put in, then, and if that name then does get into, I think Judy will quickly make contact and find out if there really is an interest. But yes, at that point, if they are part of a public disclosure if somebody asks. Yes, Chris?
Okay, this is Commissioner Richards, and I have one sort of thing that's nagging at me, and it may be not worthy of further discussion, but I'm troubled by the fact that we don't have, based on my review of the candidates, a single current person who is involved in the Tennessee Department of Education who has thrown their hat in the ring. And I find that somewhat odd. I don't know how education jobs are filled, maybe my naivety, but I was extremely troubled by the fact that we had no internal candidates based on my review of the names who were given. Maybe somebody who knows more about this can comment on it.
Yeah, Commissioner Richards, let me give you some feedback. I think what we've talked about here in the last couple minutes in doing some more outreach and asking you all if you've got some names, I just think what we're going to add to the process is making it a little more fulsome, is probably the right word. And so I would not necessarily read into it. I appreciate you raising it. I just think we need to be more engaged, and that's where Judy will be helpful in working with the search firm and going out and potentially finding people that we want to make sure they're in here. So I would expect, without knowing anything more, and I don't, that there will be that type of outreach, and potentially there may be people who are in the department right now who decide they want to be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other business conversations today? Thank you all. This has been a very productive session. I really appreciate the discussion we've had and the ability to sort of talk through the issues. If there's anybody, please indicate. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, can I take just 2 minutes?
Yes.
And then I promise I will stop taking all the time. I wanted to just say they're on the audio because of the, because of our situation here, we're not live. They would normally be in the room with us, but I just wanted to let the commission know that the last several summers when I served on the state board, I hosted fellows from the Urban Leaders Fellowship, which is a national fellowship for folks who are really interested in policy. And I have 3 fellows on the call who are working on some really cool policy ideas for me that you guys will hear about at some point. Nicole, Tara, and Robert are all three on the call. They're all young professionals who chose to spend their summer doing this work. And normally we would all take a picture with them in the room like we did with the state board, but since we can't do that and they're not able to speak, I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that they're here and listening.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. Appreciate you sharing that with us, and we welcome you all and glad that you joined us today. I hope maybe out of this there was some instructive lessons learned, but we'll find out. And I'd be interested, Wendy, whatever you get back, to hear those things. It'd be, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just one comment. I want to say, first of all, I want to thank my colleague Wendy for her passionate position in opposition of my motion. No one likes to see one of their motions go down in flames, but I thought that was a really good discussion, and I think that was proof positive that this commission is anything but a rubber stamp, and we're going to have a debate about things, and we're going to agree and disagree about things, and it was a good lesson for the fellows to actually see. So I'm glad we could provide them some positive example of how this process works.
Alan, thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate those comments. And that, as a chair, that means a lot to me. It means that we are running we're running our meetings in a way that people feel like they do have a voice and opportunity to present, and on differing sides of an issue. So thank you.
Yes,
other comments? So can I ask for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Commissioner Levine made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Derwin.
Thank you, Derwin. And Judy, I need you to call the roll, please.
Yes. Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
Commissioner Levine.
Aye.
Patterson.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
Commissioner Sisnet.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Tucker.
Aye.
Chairman Griscom.
Aye.
The motion passes. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you all. See you soon.
Thank you.